Welcome to the Peopling Podcast, where we hang out with brilliant human beings who teach us how to be better, well, humans, and decode what makes us tick and click. Inspired by the book Peopling, available on Amazon. Let's get this episode started.
Hey friends, it's Christy. Thank you so much for joining us for another Peopling podcast. This is where we lean into that simple truth that people matter so much more than things and connection matters so much more than perfection. And each conversation here is designed to inspire you and challenge you and remind you that we are here to do life together. I am so excited to introduce you to our VIP guest today. She is focused and the source of knowledge on relationships and connection, effective communication, dating, divorce, even career reinnovation. My friend Colette here is going to have to super focus in on just one topic because there's so many things that she could share with us, and hopefully she'll come back at a different time and maybe expound on another topic. But today, let me introduce you to my friend Colette and give you a formal introduction for her. And then we're going to get started into this conversation. So Colette Jane Fair is a licensed psychotherapist. She's a relationship expert, a TEDx speaker. I can't wait for you to check out her TEDx. We'll talk about that in a minute. She is the co-host of the podcast, Insights from the Couch, Real Talk at Midlife, and the author of the upcoming book that releases on February 3rd. The book is titled The Cost of Quiet: How to Have the Hard Conversations That Create Secure, Lasting Love. My gosh! Her mission is to help people find emotional freedom by speaking and living their truth. Will you please help me welcome my friend Colette? Thank you so much for being here with me.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about this. And your podcast is so aligned with everything I live for. So I'm excited for this discussion. And I hope all your listeners will forgive my little lost voice. I'm still here. It's just been a lot of talking and a lot of coughing over this last week.
Well, thank you so much. Even in the midst of a weird voice going on, you are here with us. I appreciate your time and your valuable insight and what you're going to share with us. So thank you in spite of that
You
for being here.
can't shut me up. So it's true.
Don't even try.
Don't even try.
So good. Colette, I got to see your TEDx, and although we've met and known each other a couple of different ways and for many years, I got to learn a lot more about you when I saw your TEDx. So I'm going to invite everybody after listening to this podcast, go directly into the link of the show notes and check out her amazing TEDx. You open up with a very vulnerable story. And I believe that is what led you exactly into your career today. Can you tell us a little bit more about what led you to your focus on where you're at in your practice?
Yes. Like so many things in life, good stuff comes from suffering. And I got married very young to my college sweetheart. I went to Tulane University in New Orleans, far away from where I grew up in New York. And on the first day of school at 18 years old, met this guy that captivated me immediately. But a big part of it was that I had grown up in a household in which my early childhood years were very settled. My family was very peaceful. I was an only child till I was 10, and then we had a brother. But around when I was 10, 11, just after my brother was born, my parents began to fight, and they went through the beginning of what would be about a 8-year separation, back together, fighting. My parents are wonderful people. It's not about that, but it really did disrupt my well-being in so many ways, as you can imagine. And I grew up with this mission, personal mission in mind, that I was going to have a fairy tale marriage, and that would look like no fighting, no conflict, nobody yelling, right? Peace and happiness. And so when I met this man at 18 years old, knowing nothing about grown-up relationships, just not wanting to be my parents, he seemed like the perfect solution. He was super waspy, from this very non-emotional family. I always describe them. I describe them in my book, actually, and I love them, but as very please pass the butterish. Everything, nobody's ever upset. Everything's swept under the rug. And that seemed safe to me. So we got married a couple years college. We moved to Florida. We bought the dream home. He was lucky and worked hard and was very successful in his career early on. We had babies, and then everything blew up. We never fought. We never had any problems. But whenever I would try to express, even make a little bit of an attempt to share feelings, anything, it would get met with dismissiveness or defensiveness or just shut down, or I would be outright invalidated. And so I allowed myself to be shut down. I lost connection to myself and to my voice. And I ended up feeling very alone and starting to build resentment. And then really a big shift happened right after my daughter was born. And I talk about this in my TEDx talk, where suddenly I had nearly died and I really needed him. And his responses were really no longer enough, right? Or lack of response. So that began what led to a divorce when my children were 1.5 and 3.5. And I found myself with no career, really no money, no family, really, really difficult. But right before we got divorced, we had gone to marriage counseling. That was my first experience with counseling. This particular therapist was not properly trained in couples therapy. I didn't know what I didn't know then. I could feel something was off. She did more damage than good. And there were a number of things going on in the relationship beyond the lack of communication that were really problematic. And, I won't go too deeply into that to protect other people's privacy, but she mishandled those things in a way that, knowing what I know now, I really would have reported her to the board. Yeah. Yeah. So all of this, my suffering, losing my voice in my relationship, realizing that conflict-free isn't the answer, and seeing the importance of being able to find good help when your relationship is struggling, led me to go back to grad school when my kids were still little. I was working, going to school, studying all night, and it took me 4 years to get through Rollins, but I became a marriage and family therapist, licensed mental health counselor, and my practice really specializes in working with couples because not every relationship can or should be saved, but the ones that want to, that want it, and there's still something there worth fighting for, I want to help those people learn how to communicate and create more connection.
Before we dive any deeper into this conversation, I want to take a quick moment to share a tool that has significantly improved my life, and that's called Growth Day. It's like having world-class mentors right in your pocket. There are daily challenges that help grow your confidence, your inspiration, and your drive. Check out the show notes for your link to a free trial, and don't let another moment pass you by without checking out Growth Day. I feel like I am speaking to the Wizard of Oz, right? When it comes to relationships. Your personal journey and walk created this amazing foundation that, on top of stellar education, like just that you've walked in these shoes. And I think a lot of times when somebody walks it, like enters a field, but they actually haven't gone through the mess, it could be a little bit more difficult to connect
I agree.
the truth of it all, right? So I guess my first question is, do you find that generally speaking, and I know every person and every couple is very different, do you find that like couples have the same problems on repeat until they can figure it out, or are they fighting about everything?
So it's a great question. What I really find is that it's less about the issues than people think. It's more about the way people fight. And as the Gottmans, who are the foundational relationship research people out there, say, you have to learn how to fight right. The biggest problem I see is that most people avoid conflict. Even bickering is avoiding conflict, as I frame it, because you're not really diving into your deeper feelings and your needs. We all have emotional needs. We grow and change throughout a relationship. Our feelings are pointing us to what we need in a given moment. So couples need to learn to lean into that, identify what they feel, express what they need instead of avoiding conflict. That's the biggest problem. If you can do that, whatever the issue, you can talk about it, because we know from the research that 69% of a couple's problems are not solvable, meaning that they will continue to fight about the same issues in perpetuity, forever. Right? Like you don't like how your husband leaves his underwear on the floor. I'm just making this up. He's probably going to leave his underwear on the damn floor the rest of your life. And this is a smaller example, but you'll still be fighting about one's messy, one works too much, differences in how you want to spend money. Some of those things, behaviors can change. Personality doesn't change. Some issues are going to continue to be a struggle. But if you can share your feelings in a certain way that we can get into, then you're able to feel connected in conflict instead of on separate teams, disconnected, isolated, misunderstood. That's what leads to that drift.
So we run from conversation or even the opening up of what could potentially be conflict, probably because we're scared of how to handle it. And it's
Exactly.
like what you had said, the modeling of that behavior wasn't there, right? So we don't have the right tools. So can you share with us a couple of tools where we might
Yeah.
be able to improve that? I can't wait for this.
Yes, yes. Okay. So first of all, like anything, right? The paradox of fear is that the more you do the thing you're scared of, the less scared you become. So a big part of it is starting to develop the emotional muscle to even handle an uncomfortable moment. Something really small, right? Where you feel that part of you doesn't like something, you feel unsettled, you feel a little hurt, disappointed, angry. A lot of times people will talk themselves out of saying anything. And I'm talking about low level stuff, right? The story is, oh, it's not worth it, or it'll only lead to a fight, or it's not a big deal. I shouldn't care. But this is actually an intrapsychic protective part of self trying to keep you from putting yourself out there in a situation that feels dangerous to you emotionally or dangerous to the future of the relationship. We have to kind of override that a little bit to say, I'm an adult connecting to that adult part of self, and I can speak on behalf of my feelings. Now, most people are kind of on board with that concept intellectually, but doing that in the moment, if you're not used to doing it, it is going to feel a little scary, a little uncomfortable. So, my first tip is just starting to practice building the emotional muscle and the concept, the idea of I can address things assertively. I'm an adult. I can speak up for what I feel and what I need. And in order to do that, segueing into my second tip, and this part is huge. If you're going to start anywhere, we've got to start with identifying what we're feeling in a given moment, naming those emotions, and then understanding what our narrative is. And what I mean by this is, let's say something very small happens. Let's say you come home and you say something to your partner, and he, in this case, doesn't answer you. Okay, maybe he's just distracted. He didn't hear you. But let's say you've been feeling kind of disconnected lately, and it hits you in a way that it really hurts your feelings in that moment. Okay, let's say you say nothing and you think, oh, it's not even worth it. But those moments build up, right? That's how disconnection grows. Instead, what if you pause for a minute and identify, ooh, something's happening. I'm feeling something here. And you can name, my feelings are hurt. I feel hurt. I feel disappointed, right? If you can actually identify what emotions are happening, this takes you out of the amygdala, which is the fear center in your brain, and brings your prefrontal cortex back online, which is where you have access to logic and reasoning. It creates a little nervous system regulation, and it gives you a little bit of space to notice what's happening to you as it's happening. Then what's the story? And the story usually feels like just the truth, but it's a narrative. The way the brain works, you feel something and those feelings contribute to the meaning you make of what's happening. So you might make meaning in this example I'm making up that I'm not important to him, or let's say I'm not a priority anymore. So in the moment, if you're feeling hurt and disappointed, and the story is I'm not a priority to you, by going through and identifying those things, again, you're creating a little bit of space, a little bit of regulation. And if you're able to then express that to your partner, then you have the opportunity to be heard for what really matters, to have repair, and to create more connection.
My goodness.
I know
It
it's a
seems
lot. It's a
it is
lot.
a lot, but it translates into every relationship we have. You used an
Yes.
example of, my
Yes.
spouse, right? But it's hearing how we communicate with our parents, our kids, sisters, best friends. Like we've all been through experiences, and sometimes we put that experience right front and center and see everything through that lens, and we have no idea
That's
that we're even
exactly what
doing
happens.
that.
Right. Right. Because your personality, your history with that person, your history before that person, how hangry you are in that moment, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. All of those things are going to contribute to how you filter what's happening. And you can't prevent yourself from getting triggered, from having narratives pop up, but we can prevent the reaction from being something that hijacks and derails the relationship or the interaction.
This is so good, Colette. So I know that there's just a million things going through my mind right now. There's so many things that if we get this wrong, right, we don't
Yep.
take that pause. You were
Yep.
saying that disconnect, just the layers, the every time that there's an occurrence, it's just more validation of that belief, right?
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
further furthers
You
that.
end up, it becomes a positive or negative self-fulfilling feedback loop that the thing you fear, the narrative feels more and more true because you don't address it and you don't get it repaired and cleared up.
And we live into it.
Yep. Yep. And
Wow.
then you take protective action because of that belief, and then your partner reacts to your protective action. Let's say you storm out of the room in a huff. Your partner who didn't hear you goes, "What the hell's wrong with her? I didn't even do anything." Right? And then he has a story and a feeling. So we want to be able to get to the place in a coupleship where both people can say, "Hey, something just happened. When you reacted like that," right? You're not focused on them. You express the trigger neutrally, but inside of me, I noticed I felt this way. I had this story. And then we express empathy and validation. We clear up the misunderstanding. And in an ideal scenario, we move on. But a big part of my mission, Christy, because we can't control our partner or anyone else, as you well know, we don't know that we're going to be heard. I always say this improves your chances of being heard, but there's no guarantee. And a lot of us have partners who are traumatized or underdeveloped. They haven't done their own work or they're too triggered. You're not going to necessarily get a perfect reaction, but you've got to do your part, not just for the relationship, but for you. This is about the value of speaking up for yourself and never letting anyone take your voice from you. You are going to be miserable, bitter, and filled with resentment if you don't do it.
That is so absolutely powerful. And we you're right. We can't change what anybody else says, does, thinks, behaves, but I can be responsible for myself. And it is so powerful. Okay.
Goosebumps even when you say it, because it's such a core truth to the human experience.
And it's empowering, I think
Yes.
I think if you haven't experienced it in your life, there's a chance that there's somebody, a relationship that you might feel disempowered or that you don't have a voice, right? There's a chance that we've all kind of lived through that with somebody.
Totally.
Maybe a parent or a caretaker, an ex
A
relationship.
boss. Yeah.
Yeah, you might be living with that person in your life right now. So we can control how we respond and how we approach it. I love that. You're saying, "Hey, when you said that, this is what happened to me." So we're not pointing fingers and forcing people to be defensive. It's like, "Hey, I'm acknowledging something that I was completely unaware of, and
Yes.
I'm feeling this, and I don't know why I'm feeling this, and maybe I need some time to feel the
Yes.
feels."
Yes,
So
and
that this
that's the
doesn't become.
key, is what you just said, is that it's very I, and very little you, because we're human. And if somebody starts, even if it's valid, again, perceptions, there's two subjective experiences always. There's no room for like objective truth in a relationship. You will get nowhere with that. That's for lawyers and the courtroom. You and I could look out the window at the very same scene and we're going to describe it differently in the same moment. even when there's no emotional charge. You and your partner are rarely going to see the same facts the same way. And we don't have to agree. It's not what it's about. It's about saying, this is what I experienced when this happened. And I'm reaching to you for connection. You don't have to agree with me. I just would like to be heard and understood. If we don't feel heard and understood, we're not going to feel good in a relationship. And there's, as you probably well know, and all you guys listening to, there's a million barriers to getting heard and understood. Communication is very complicated. We all have histories, traumas, right? Different personalities. It's not that easy, but this is our best way. Control what we do, how we show up, and really not self-abandon. Because when you don't speak your emotional truth, you're abandoning yourself, your inner child.
That's such a strong term, and it just makes me feel like so lonely. The word abandonment, like nobody wants that right
Nobody
now.
wants that.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah. So I just I don't know. I feel like that 5-year-old that was left at the grocery store, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, I was completely forgotten. How did you forget me?
And Christy, what you're just saying right now, that is literally in some of these conflictual moments, exactly what people emotionally feel with their partner. In the present, they're standing there with the partner and the partner didn't hear them. But emotionally, that 5-year-old inside that was left in the grocery store, that's exactly what's getting activated. We are all terrified of rejection and abandonment, and it's wired into the human experience because we're wired for connection. We know that we survive and thrive best when we live closely connected to safe, reliable, trusted loved ones. So we're supposed to feel a big fear and charge. But the problem is, it comes up a lot, these survival feelings and mechanisms around very mundane daily stuff. So we got to communicate through it.
That is extraordinary. Okay. So how do we get this right? We've got to upgrade our mindset, and there's no way that we let go of or release our prior experiences. It's part
Right.
of what makes us who we are. But how do we now just kind of reframe our thinking so that we can, and it's going to be messy the first couple times you try, just to your point
It's going
earlier,
to be
like,
messy, probably to some degree, always a little. But yeah, 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 yeah. It gets
all
easier
right.
with time. It gets easier with time.
Okay, and practice and having that conversation and probably getting into the flow, with your partner. You start to see how they respond to how you've responded. So what's a tip or two that we could, gave us a really great example, but maybe a boss or a parent or somebody who is like a form of authority, not necessarily a partner. Could you give us an approach on how we might be able to uh, uh, you know approach
Yeah.
that?
Oh, it's such a great question. So, first, along the lines, I just want to say of the mindset thing, right, is shifting into just what you said, that these triggers are inevitable, accepting our past experiences, expecting that we're not going to be perfect, that we're going to have big emotions, and that we're going to mess up. Sometimes we're just not going to say it perfectly because that's human. And the key that I want to stress across all relationships, whether it's a boss, a family member, a partner, is that even more important than how you do it in the moment, and all the research shows this, is how you repair. So if your emotions get the best of you or you act like a jerk, coming back and taking accountability and saying, hey, I'm really sorry. My tone of voice wasn't great. Having a hard day. I'm sure that didn't feel good to hear it like that. All the research shows that that kind of repair, small repairs along the way, goes a huge way toward clearing the yuck. So really important, repair, repair, repair. Now, in terms of addressing these other contexts, obviously with your partner, we want to be more vulnerable about the deeper emotions because it creates connection, and that's emotional intimacy. Certain other relationships, there's only so much of that that might be appropriate or that it even feels safe to do, even if things are at their ideal, right? You're not going to tell your boss necessarily, I felt like a 5-year-old in the grocery store being abandoned. I mean, unless you have this super amazing therapist boss, right? So, but what is important still is to adhere to the principles that I talk about in my TEDx talk and in my book. of being the degree of vulnerable that's appropriate for the situation. And what I mean by vulnerable, it's such an overused word, but it's so important. Vulnerable to me is just really being honest about what you feel, if we want to simplify it. And at the same time, you're being assertive. And that means being clear and direct, right? We're not like overtaking responsibility for somebody else's reaction. We're just going to say the thing. And then I think a part that people forget is that you can be vulnerable and assertive, which means direct, but also be kind at the same time. And kindness, it's not being nice. It's not being the good girl who manages other people's feelings. It's being tactful or diplomatic. And that's very important in any relationship. So when it comes to a boss, you might have something, it is difficult with the power dynamic where you need to set a boundary. Maybe you're being asked to do somebody else's job and you're not being compensated for it. And it's going on and on and on. That's got to be addressed. It's a little bit sticky, but coming to the table and getting clear first on, okay, what exactly am I feeling? Same thing, naming and identifying that. Maybe you feel overburdened, overwhelmed, disrespected, right? Identify what those feelings are, and then to be able to go with a clear message about what you need and what your limits are. So you might go to a boss and say, look, I want to care about our relationship. I value you so much. That's kind of the attachment piece that helps somebody be able to listen to you. And lately, my experience is that I'm doing the job, my own job and somebody else's, and it's becoming unmanageable for me. I'm feeling overwhelmed and even disrespected. Here's what I need, right? I need more support to hire another person, to carve out time in my day, whatever it is, you've got to know that in advance. If your boss doesn't respond well, to go with this example, then you're going to say, okay, you're going to listen with curiosity. Maybe you don't like what you're hearing and you have to regulate yourself a little. And again, it's still your boss, but you're going to say, okay, I hear you. And if that is what you're willing to do, then here's where my boundaries stand. And I think this is part of where we really have to empower ourselves, that even when there's a power differential, we've got to speak up more than we usually are. People are so afraid of repercussions, being cast out, losing a job, all factors that, of course, you have to take into account. But finding a way to say, hey, here's where I stand. We all have the right. Human integrity is the right to communicate what you're experiencing and ask for what you need to feel whole, to feel respected, to feel treated with dignity. And if you're not getting that, you got to say something about it.
Colette, this is so good. There's so many yummy things that you just said in there. First of all, I love the act with kindness, right? Sometimes for me, when I'm hurt, I wanna hurt back, right? I want to
Yep.
punch below the belt and I want you to feel what I'm feeling. But that's just gonna, perpetuate this big old
The
dramatic
cycle.
fight. Yep. That doesn't need to exist. So I love like removing out the pain for a moment, leading with kindness. I love that. You said so many incredible things in there. One of the things that you stated that was my biggest takeaway is, especially if you're talking to, say, a boss, a lot of times they're so busy running the department or the business or, whatever, nose grinding, right? That they just may not be aware. And if you're over here going, how come I'm so undervalued? How come I can't be appreciated? How come you don't see all this extra work I'm doing and honoring me for it, or, appreciating me for it, or paying me for it even? If you don't, to your point, speak up for yourself. They may never know. It may not be intentional at all.
Exactly.
Getting clarity on what your actual needs are and asking for it.
Yes.
Giving yourself the permission to ask with boldness and being courageous in the face of, this is gonna be scary.
Yep.
I'm not gonna
Yep.
like this. It's going to feel uncomfortable. Speaking up for yourself. I don't know, I'm sure that others have taken away a lot of other really incredible things, but that's what landed with me
Such
most.
a good summary. Such a
I
good
love
summary.
great jobs because of lousy managers. And it's
Me
not
too.
necessarily that they weren't leading well. They just, I felt unseen,
Yep. Me too,
underappreciated.
Christy. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet a lot of people listening right now are like, "Oh my god, that's my life
Yep.
right
Yep.
now." And I wanna encourage you, get really clear on your message, approach with kindness.
Yep. And say the thing, and say the thing. Because you're so right. And even in personal relationships, I hear people all the time saying, my partner should know, or I wish they'd just know, or don't they know after all this time, or isn't it obvious? Guess what? It's not psychologically possible. It is hard enough to figure out your own self in a given moment. We cannot expect that anybody else is seeing, intuiting, even if it seems super obvious. It is our job and our adult responsibility to identify what we're feeling, ask for what we need, be vocal, advocate for ourselves in every context and relationship in life. And a lot of times you're right. You're going to be surprised that somebody didn't even realize. A reasonable adult person, even a boss, if you come forward with this formula of being vulnerable and honest, being assertive, but also being kind, they're going to respect your honesty and your forthrightness. There are always damaged people who aren't able to hear what you say no matter what. But if you don't get a good reaction, at least you're going to know that you've done your part. And then you can see what that job can and cannot be, what that marriage can and cannot be. And then you're empowered to make decisions. Do I want to leave? Can I live with this? Right? Then we have choices because we have information.
That's so good. So many people are probably feeling like I'm trapped. And
Yes.
then from this approach, it's like, no, I actually have a choice. And I've allowed myself, I've created this space to now make a choice with the decision, with the information that I have now.
Yep.
Oh, it's
And sometimes we're afraid of getting the truth, of hearing the truth, because it maybe we kind of suspect or we fear, and people want to know, but they don't want to know. But that's all normal, and we need to know. We're grown-ups. We can handle the truth. Like Jack Nicholson said, you can't handle the truth. Yes, we can.
yes, we can. I appreciate some of my favorite people, my favorite friends in my life are the ones that have the boldness to say the hard things out of
Yep.
love.
Yep.
And it's not hurtful. It's never with the intention of hurtful, but it's like, hey, you want greatness for yourself. You want to grow every single day. You want to give the world the best version of yourself. Well, this is what's happening and that's stifling your ultimate goal that you told me. I'm like, God, I love you so much for that and it hurts, but bringing it back to something you said, with curiosity.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
huge.
that, somewhere in our young little adolescent minds, maybe that curiosity got stifled a little bit or shut out or not tolerated or allowed, and maybe we lost a sense of just listening with curiosity somewhere along the way. And I love that because if I could sit there, if you came to me and said something hard, and I said, "Well, I'm curious. What is it about my reaction or my tone or my response that now makes you feel that way?" At least we're now just open to seeing, yeah, instead of, like, defending, and
Exactly.
so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah,
that.
now the problem with that too, I just wanna add to what you're saying, one of the reasons we don't retain curiosity, yes, some people never were given permission ever in life, it was never safe to even be curious, and our childhood wonder gets tamped down, as you're saying, but also people get triggered really easily, and it's a lot easier for me if you told me about how your partner reacted. I'm not in the relationship, I have nothing at stake, to be curious and go, "Oh, tell me more." But we have to be able to access that adult part of self when we're in what I call the sage self, which is our wisest, most grounded adult self. That part of us is naturally, we always have it, it's in there. That part of us is naturally calm, curious, and compassionate, unless you are a legitimate sociopath. Then you have different brain structures and you have other problems. But, and I'm not even kidding, but otherwise, there is a natural part of all of us, a state, a part we can connect with that is wired to be calm and open and compassionate and grounded. We just have to remember in the moment when we get triggered to breathe, to give ourselves some compassion, to do whatever we need in the moment to regulate ourselves a little so we can get back to that adult part where we can be curious.
It's so beautiful. All right, my final question for you.
Yes.
So appreciate our time together. This has just been amazing. We want to be the change in the world, right? So, what kind of change do we want to see around us? Can you give us an assignment of a couple of things that we can do to be the change to those around us now? And then
Ugh.
hopefully it becomes this ripple effect.
You're so right. I love that we're ending on this note. So I think it's some of the things we're talking about. Listen with curiosity. When someone shares something with you, we all have a fixing urge, right? If we want to make it better, we want to resolve it. Instead of rushing to fix, listen to somebody, get curious, ask questions. Even if a part of you feels a little upset, a little unsettled, a little triggered, it is so powerful to lend someone your genuine, authentic presence. You'll be amazed at how good it feels for you, how good it feels for them. And when you offer that to someone, they often reciprocate. That is one of the most powerful ways you can set off a chain reaction of connection in this world. And the second is, I would say, as an assignment. Pick something small that bothers you a little. It doesn't have to be a big thing. In fact, it's better if it's a smaller thing. Maybe somebody at the office keeps using your coffee cup and they don't wash it. Maybe your partner at home, has this annoying habit and they get defensive if you bring it up. Pick that little thing and do the process I'm talking about of what I call self-connected communication. Identify what you feel, identify what you need, and go broach the subject. Don't worry if it's perfect, right? But just try, flex those muscles and try to exercise them a little because there is no way for this kind of self advocacy to get more comfortable unless we do it. It's not going to come out of a book. It's not going to come out of what I tell you. I can tell you till I'm blue in the face. And in fact, if me telling you was enough, I wouldn't even have a job because you could read about it and go do it. In my office, I am making people do the muscles in session. So go use your muscle, be assertive, be vulnerable, take a little risk, be kind in your delivery. And if it doesn't go well, know that you have a sage, loving self. You can be there for you, and that it feels good to speak your truth no matter how anyone else responds.
So good. I hope everybody listening attempts this
Me
right
too.
away.
Me too. And if
Let's
you
do it
struggle,
up.
you can always call me and I can help you. Yeah.
There you go. Colette, thank you so much for being here with us today, for all of the value that you brought to everybody who gets the pleasure of listening to you. This podcast is a result of the book, the Peopling book. So I invite you to check out my Peopling book on Amazon. And then in these show notes, there's all sorts of ways to not only connect, but also hear and learn more about Colette Fair. So you'll get to see her TEDx, pre-order her book. Go connect with her on social media. She has great content. I love,
Thank
love,
you.
love what you share on Instagram every single day. You're
Thank
dropping
you.
just nuggets that
I am. I'm
remind
on there
me,
all the time. Yes.
remind me just how important connection and kindness and curiosity is in our human experience. So you are just a gem to this
Thank
world.
you.
So I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
And
for having me. And thank you to all of you guys listening. I've really enjoyed it. And I would love to come back anytime and talk about whatever you want.
we've got a lot more to unpack, no doubt.
Absolutely.
All
Thank
right.
you,
Until next
Christy.
time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Peopling Podcast and grab your copy of the Peopling book on Amazon and let's keep this connection movement going. Until next time, be curious, be kind, and keep peopling like you mean it.